Welcome. I was pondering the theme of this year's Open Set workshop, Memories of the Future. And when I'm doing that, I can't help thinking about how much the future always looks remarkably like the times we knew. As if the future is indeed something we remember rather than foresee. It's obvious, of course, any idea what the future might hold for us is grounded in memories of the past. It seems that the radically new is beyond us. It looks and feels naked, harsh, so we need to clothe it, dress it up in forms we recognize and accept as being familiar. Take the steam engine. The engineer's vision of this machine focuses on its working, on the way the parts fit and move together to produce the designed effect. But if we leave it at that, the resulting machine contrasts too much with the things that we know. Its formal reality is not only literally unseen, but also symbolically. If you don't have any concept of what a steam engine is, you can't see it for what it is. You only see a massive mess of metal that grinds away mysteriously. Now, so we dress it up. For ages, we have used aesthetics of the past to embellish our present and to charge it with the symbolism of traditions. These examples of steam machines from the end of the 19th century are, I think, very, very good examples of this mechanism of clothing unseen new things in traditional forms. You see the Doric columns here. If you look at this one, this is an engineer's drawing, and there's no embellishment. Well, a little bit decoration in the basis, but the rest is just the machine. And as soon as it starts to act, not just in its technical context, but in a social and cultural context, it becomes embellished. This is I think, very nice one. Sort of a classical, almost Romeo and Juliet kind of balcony or tower. That the romanticism of this little serre, you could say, highly contrasts with the machine itself. And this is, of course, an almost hysterical design in which the machine actually almost becomes a church or a temple. So my point here is that these formal additions not only serve to embellish the frightful machine, but they also provide a link with the revered past. They are employed to give a mundane machine the solemn air of classic beauty and elevated civilization. Of course, the direct usefulness of such elaborate decoration is questionable, but they definitely carry a meaning, these decorations. These Greek columns and neo-Gothic arches tell us something about the importance of the machine. It is the heart of a workplace unknown to the world before, the holy shrine of the industrial age. It's a temple of a new era, and the center of an almost religious cult of progress that demands total commitment and belief from everybody, from the boss to the heater. Looking at the richly decorated icons of the Industrial Revolution, in this manner you see more than rational engineering. You see a morality clad gracefully in cast iron. Now, images and symbols of the past have been always used to visualize our idea of the present and our imagination of the future. This is a nice example. The new device is doing technically what the Tower of Babel of Bruegel symbolizes in a more virtual way, that we reach for the stars or reach for the position of God. Regardless of the underlying symbolism in Bruegel's original painting, man can never reach the place of God, is of course the message. The idea that we should at least try keeps coming back. Also in more abstract forms, for instance in Tatlin's 1920 design for a monument to the Third International, which was intended as a gigantic high-tech construction. It looks pretty straightforward and metally, but it houses the height, at least the design, it was never built of course, it houses the height of technological achievement of that time in Russia and in the world, I would say. So this gigantic high-tech construction is clad in a formal structure that harks back to the spiraling imagination of the Tower of Babel. Seen in this context, the 1920s and 30s were a rare period of radically new visualizations of the future. A completely new visual language was developed for architecture, design, and communication. Even when it sort of makes an abstract reference to older forms like the spiraling Tower of Babel, it's still, in terms of its visual expression, is a radically new visual language, you could say. Today we talk about the historical avant-gardes when we refer back to that period. The radical innovation of how the world of the future would look has become a revered past and a not wholly unproblematic present. Look at this plan, for instance, Frank Lloyd Wright's Broadacre City, started in the early 1930s. He worked on it for a long time. Someone described this as the apotheosis of suburbia, even before it was really invented, because the 30s is the start of what we now call urban sprawl. You see a lot of plans that, ideal plans, you could say, if you look at the work of Le Corbusier, for instance, but also at the work of Frank Lloyd Wright, that on the one hand translate this technological vision and project it onto the city, and on the other hand, reference to sometimes a kind of nostalgic longing for the simple life of the past. That's particularly true in this plan that is basically assuming a more or less total self-reliance and autonomy of the people who live there. They all have an acre of land on which they can grow their own food, etc., etc. At the same time, they have what is called aerotors, flying cars, like kind of helicopter things that, as you can probably see from the drawings, the architect himself had no idea how that would technically work, but he sort of drew them in to give this idea of personal transportability and a freedom of movement. If you look at whatever is visible of public roads, you see that the only thing that is on there and that moves there is cars. So basically you have your acre in the sky in huge building complexes where you're totally autonomous and you fly over the rest of the landscape to do whatever you have to do outside of the home. But basically there's built a huge contrast between the home and the family and the place of the family and let's say the social and economic fabric that is supposed to knit that together, but only in plans like these only does that in a technological way. The social is completely forgotten in plans like this. So there's this, you could say in retrospect, naive combination of nostalgia for a simple agrarian life clad in the rational formal language of radical urbanism. although they've been heavily criticized, such urban utopias have since looked more or less the same. This is a drawing for a future city from the 60s. And you see a remarkable consistency in the fact that in all of these utopic renderings, this is a recent one, projecting, well, somewhere around 2050 or something. And this is, of course, an old one from 1927, Frits Lang's Metropolis. And in all of these imaginations of the future, the reoccurring thing is our wish to fly individually, not like, you know, with 500 people in a Dreamliner, but to have our own flying cars. However much science, engineering, social and cultural factors say that this is maybe technically possible, but socially and economically pretty stupid. The idea of, you know, having cars in the air. The dream still lingers on. Another thing is in depictions of the future is the fact that they can be invariably connected to the time of making. If you look at, okay, the things in the sky are indeed futuristic, but look at the cars and the trains. They definitely have not moved much beyond the 1950s or early 60s, and that is, of course, when this drawing was made. So again, we imagine the future based on what we know. And if we don't know it, we forget about the practicality of things, like in the aeroplanes and rockets and what have you. More or less the same here. This looks pretty futuristic to us now. It was, like I said, it is from this period. But if you look at the details of the buildings and the way they are arranged, you can probably source back almost every of those buildings to an existing building now. The flying car assumes that somehow in the future we will be able to find something about gravity. But the formal language of it is closely connected to the things that we do know, the maglev kind of trains that you have there. And like I said, you know, since Frits Lang and made this film Metropolis, which you could call a pretty dystopic view to the city of the future, anything that depicts a future urban environment needs flying things in it. Oh yeah, just one more thing. The dog I like very much too, because this is really an old icon. It is so IBO, so 1999. I mean, it's almost a technological relic by now. So, what it boils down to is that the future has looked quite the same for the past century or so. All of this basically boils down to the fact that whether we look back or forward, we project our present. Our imagination is based on what is familiar to us, quite literally. Whether we imagine life in the Stone Age or in the far future, we copy what we know. Our nuclear family with 2 kids, a dog and a car, whether in the sky or here. I don't know if you remember the Flintstones and the Jetsons, but if you look at the narratives, you can make almost, you know, in pure narrative sense, you can make almost seamless cuts between the two, because in fact, they depict the same kind of stories. A family that goes to work, and mother stays home and cooks, and the kids go to school, and all kinds of stuff. And these two are literally copies of each other in terms of their social working and the culture within which that takes place. The only difference is that the devices and houses and urban environment that they do it in looks slightly different, also only at the surface, because at root this flying saucer is no different than this primitive imagination of a car. So, we copy what we know. I always find it nice that this image is projected via a not so sharp beamer, because if on your computer screen you'll see it immediately. Here you'll have probably a bit trouble of knowing that this is not a real photo of a Swiss Alp landscape, but a 100% computer reconstruction made by the Swiss artist couple Studer van den Berg. They ironize this tendency to spend a huge effort in reproducing what we know with ever newer means in their meticulous reconstruction of an idealized version of a Swiss alpine hotel, Vue des Alpes, including the majestic sights, as you see here, using cutting-edge virtual reality software, at least at the time. This is 2000, so relatively early. Hotel Vue des Alpes was also a relatively early interactive virtual reality environment. You could book a room in the hotel and spend time virtually walking through the Swiss landscape. So, on the one hand, we spend huge effort in reproducing what we know. On the other hand, we not only try hard to reproduce nature by any means available, but we also have a deep craving for turning to life the figments of our imagination. This also since a very long time. Of course, you know the myth of Pygmalion, here in a 19th century painting by Jean-Léon Gérôme. Pygmalion is the ancient Greek sculptor that we know from Ovid's Metamorphosis, a 2,000-year-old tale. In this case, the sculptor, who's very good at realistic rendering of, in this case, a female figure, falls in love with his marble statue and prays to the gods that they would give him someone that looks like her. Upon which the goddess of love breathes life into the marble sculpture. So we want to breathe life into our into what we imagine, into what we make. We want to make it real. Of course, this has a flip side, which to me is symbolized in this beautiful engraving by Goya in 1907. The sleep of reason, it says in Spanish, the sleep of reason produces monsters. This is an interesting image to me, because it says that when we only imagine, when we only dream, then things might happen that we don't want. We not only dream beautiful things, we dream pretty ugly things as well. But it also says, the combination of these two images and what they mean tells me that we have always mixed the real and the imagined, the past and the future, our thoughts and reality, our imaginations and the corporeal material world. This balance has always been quite dynamic, in the sense that in let's say pre 1920s times, you would see that the new was clad in familiar, recognizable, symbolically understandable forms, that from the 1910s and 20s onward, there's a new visual language that is radically new, and it takes a while before people adjust to that. But then it becomes more or less standardized in almost in the same way as the classical language in earlier times. Today, I would say this mix of past and future has become unbalanced. What we see around us in terms of, the things that are being built, houses, cities, cars, visually they look pretty much the same for the last 20, 30 years. There has been very little innovation of visual languages. We have, in a sense, become retrospective rather than future-oriented. And the best way to demonstrate that is to discuss a few design memes of popular cars in the last 15 years. This is the new Volkswagen Beetle. It was introduced in 1989 and was the first of a kind of what I called cheeky retro-futurism in car design that, at the start of this millennium. Of course, it's a remake of this one, the old Volkswagen. And it was followed by the PT Cruiser, a family car inspired by cool hot rods from the 1930s and 40s. So muscle cars in which, those are muscle cars in which American young men dared each other and did hair-raising races. The PT Cruiser's formal language is a mix of that, let's say, testosterone source and Prozac, you could say. It's a kind of fake masculinity at a time when male domination in culture is starting to wane. Typically, it was meant as a really cool and masculine car. The interesting thing about the sales records of this car is that the man didn't buy it, literally and figuratively. It was quite popular with women. So this reference didn't really work. This is another one, the Mini and the new Mini. And you had an updated version of this little cute car, the Fiat Topolino 500, which in 2004 became this one. The forerunner of the new Cinquecento was called Trepunto. It was presented at the Geneva Motor Show under the telling theme Return to the Future. Designed by Roberto Giolito, it harked back, of course, to the original Fiat introduced in 1957. So, you could say that the evolution of these cars, of the Volkswagen New Beetle and from the old Volkswagen to the Volkswagen New Beetle, is a paradoxical reflection on recent history. If you would summarize it, you could say from diligent thrift to droll opulence. These cars hark back to memories of a simpler, less complicated life of more than half a century ago. But these cars are technically closer to their current bigger brothers like Mercedes or Audi or what have you than to the modest working class cars they once were. They were. Now there's the only resemblance between a car like this and this is the outside. This is a car that was designed for the common man, and this is one designed as a toy for young and hip urbanites with a nostalgia for less complicated times than ours. They're fitted with everything a modern car needs on the inside in terms of power, ease of use, safety, economy. It's pure styling on the outside. Remarkable, in my view, in the design of all of these cars is their cuteness. A kind of cartoonish charm of which the effect is comparable with the smile of nostalgic recognition triggered by old photos. How young and sweet and clumsy we were, and so authentic. And a lot thinner too. These cars were are pretty much fatter than their originals. In that respect, they aptly resemble the emancipation of the working classes, except, of course, for the fact that these cars are not made for the working classes. They are too expensive. So these cars can be filed, in my view, as telltale large-scale retro products of the new millennium. They indicate a still rising swell of things that pretend they are of old, icons of a nostalgic longing for an idealized past. This is nostalgia of the sweetest kind, a longing for better days, softened by the additions of luxury, which we would, of course, definitely not want to do without. The simplicity of the past with today's amenities. In that sense, it connects to a plan like Frank Lloyd Wright's, in which sort of an old rural kind of society is connected to today's or future amenities like flying cars, etc. So, but what today about new things, really new things? Things that don't have an obvious link with the past, that don't have a model that goes back 50 or 100 years or even older. Things that are radically new, such as the smartphone. If you would have shown this gadget to anyone, say 25 years ago, I guarantee you no one would have had a clue of what this is. No one. So this is radically new. It didn't exist 10 years ago, maybe in the imagination somewhere, but 20, 25 years ago, no one would know what this is. So, this is a new form that by now we recognize as a thing that can do something, a lot of things actually. You can not only call with it, that's a marginal aspect of smartphones today. You can do a lot of things with it, but since probably that plays that is a factor here. Since this is such a new thing, it takes a while before let's say the formal expression of it becomes really diversified. They all, whichever smartphone you have now, they all hark back to the original iPhone design. With slight variations. So, I mean, put like a row of a dozen smartphones on the table, and from a distance you would be hard pressed to accurately name them all. This is a case in point. How do you see that this is a Fairphone? Well, because it's on there. And how do you know what makes Fairphone different from, say, an iPhone or a Samsung Galaxy? What's the difference? You don't see it. But there is, of course, a story around it. Communicated through images like this, in which you can see that you can do with Fairphone things that you can't do with any other smartphone, which is take it apart. And it tells you that it's the next step towards fairer electronics. It explains to you why that is, and calculates in which context this takes place and how it works, and what the idea is. So the story that this smartphone, this device, wants to tell you is in the information that surrounds it, the information that comes with it. It's not in the formal expression of the phone itself. That is, like I said, more or less the same as any iPhone or Samsung or what have you. So one of the questions I find really interesting in design today is how do you make such stories visible? How do you find a visual language that expresses this, you could say, ideology? Is there a visual language that can do that? Well, people try. Of course, this one is hard because you know the the phone itself, yeah, how could you really translate this story into the form of the phone? That's a hard one. Reusing things can be a quite obvious way of telling stories through a visual language. This is an interesting point. We have here a classic tweed jacket, and here's a kind of shoes that is made from that. So the model of the shoe is rather classic. I have a pair here. They're different, yes, because these shoes are made from old clothes like jackets and things like that. Typically, from one discarded jacket, you can't make many shoes. So these shoes are basically one of a kind, which is nice. So it's, on the one hand, you have a story that comes with the shoes. On the other hand, it sort of expresses itself because the fabric looks kind of odd for shoes. Of course, so I could say, although here it is not extremely clear, but there's the start of you could say, what you could call a visual language of reuse. The idea of translating a story to the surface of the product. Another example of that is this design by Annelies de Vet for Droogdesign's UP program. In that project, Droog bought old stock from factories that they didn't use, that they couldn't sell anymore. Mostly quite banal things, like in this case, cups and saucers of a very simple kind. So how do you upgrade that? How can you make that from a really mundane object into something that carries meaning? Annelies de Vet did that by just printing words on it. And now it becomes, because of the placement of the words and the design of the cup, the whole cup and saucer thing becomes a playful arrangement of ideas and concepts. So the simple addition changes the cultural meaning of this object from a totally banal piece of domestic equipment to a conversation piece. A more large-scale way of doing that, of subtly changing the history of useful objects that in their original form have a limited range of application into a broader field of association, is the Design Bureau of Superuse. They adopted a strategy to make projects, to design projects not just based on the requirements of the client, like how much space and what kind of function, etc., but do that in concert with a research into what materials are available within a relatively small circle around the location of the project. So they find, and this sort of triggers a new kind of creativity. We have, blades from windmills, or you find a place where, to your surprise, there's a whole stack of discarded cockpit glasses, or things like that. And if you go through the world with a mindset that thinks with even the oddest thing that you encounter, what can I do with it? Even if I think of something that this was totally not intended for, then you come up with these kind of things. The Wikado playground, or these, a series of benches also made from old windmill parts, or the design of restaurant Moes in Amsterdam, in which most of the interior is from a limited range of sources in the neighborhood. I'll give you an overview. This is how it looks. This is what they call harvest map of the materials used for the restaurants, and you see that there's about 5 kilometers from. So this is where the restaurant is, in the center of the circle, and 5 kilometers away there's a place where old cable reels are either repaired or taken apart for burning wood, etc., etc. But Superio Studios thought they could use it in a different way. For instance, in making this kind of ceilings and benches. Then you have rubber rolls that come from an old printer's factory. There's metal parts, light boxes from Schiphol, etc., etc. So this is a new way of looking at the world of things as a potential material resource. You don't go out anymore and mine for metal or whatever, and then make iron out of it or steel and then pour it into objects. No, that has already been done. Now let's see what we can do with things that we don't need anymore, that are broke in some way, that cannot fulfill their function anymore, their original function. Can they have a new function? This, I think you agree with me, this almost necessarily leads to a new visual language. Because it sort of stitches materials together in a different way. So I think there's an interesting lesson for design as well, is that if you work with existing materials, it sort of forces you to think the way things are connected visually, narratively, symbolically, to think that in a new way. And I would say that is a rather more interesting thing to imagine the future of design or our future environments than to simply project what we know onto a landscape that looks barren and unexplored, like this ridiculous imagination of life on Mars. I thank you for your attention.